When I was a kid, my parents used to point at a dusty coffee can on top of the fridge and say, "That's where dreams start, Liv." I thought they were kidding. Every time my grandparents came over, my grandpa would drop a few dollars into that can with a wink. Later, when I got older, the can disappeared and I started hearing the phrase college fund. "Your grandma and grandpa started a 529 for you," my mom would tell anyone who'd listen. "We're putting in what we can too. This girl is going to be the first in the family to get a 4-year degree." They'd squeeze my shoulder and tell me to study hard because your future is taken care of. I believe. Why wouldn't I? My name is Olivia. I grew up in a middle-class suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, and until I was 19, my entire life plan revolved around that phrase, "Your future is taken care of." It took me a long time to realize they meant my brother's future, not mine. Back then, my little brother Ethan was the wild one. He was 2 years younger, the kind of kid who somehow managed to fail classes while never missing a party. Cars, friends, girlfriends, there was always some minor disaster swirling around him. Me? I was the dependable one. The girl who babysat, got straight A's, and never missed curfew. The one teachers wrote recommendation letters for without even needing to think. When my grandparents died, grandma of a stroke when I was 16, grandpa of a broken heart about a year later, their lawyer called us to his office. He read the will in a bland, professional voice. There were sentimental items, a little money for my parents, something set aside for my Aunt Linda. Then to our granddaughter, Olivia Harper, we leave the contents of the education savings account that we started on the day she was born, to be used exclusively for her college education. My grandma had even added a handwritten note, attached with a paperclip. It said, "Liv, this is so you never have to choose between studying and paying your bills. Promise us you'll finish." My parents cried when he read that. I cried too. It never occurred to me, sitting in that office in my thrift store black dress, that the people who were supposed to protect that wish would be the ones to betray it. I got into Ohio State with a partial scholarship. The rest was supposed to come from the college fund. And for the first 3 semesters it did. Every quarter, a line showed up on my online student account, payment from 529 plan Harper/grandparents. My balance dropped to near zero. I worked a part-time job at the campus library to cover food and books and the occasional Netflix subscription, but I wasn't drowning. I called home every Sunday. My parents always asked about my grades, my friends, whether I was safe walking home from late labs. They told me not to worry about money. "We've got the college fund," Dad would say. "Just keep those as coming, kiddo." Then, halfway through my sophomore year, the payments stopped. I remember staring at my account at 2 in the morning, the numbers blurring on the screen. A new balance had appeared, $7,943 due by the end of the month. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I called the bursar's office. They confirmed the 529 payment had been declined by the plan administrator. They suggested I talk to the account owner. The account owner was my father. When I called home, he sounded tired. More tired than I'd ever heard him. "Market's down," he said. "Your grandparents had a lot of that fund in stocks. We're trying to figure it out, but there just isn't enough to cover this semester and the next." I remember standing in the dorm stairwell, my phone slick in my hand, listening to the echo of my own voice as I said, "So what do I do? Take out some loans?" he said. "Plenty of kids do it. Or maybe take a semester off, regroup. Honestly, Liv, you've been going hard. There's no shame in slowing down." My mom got on the line, soothing and practical. "You're such a hard worker," she said. "You'll land on your feet no matter what. Maybe transfer to community college for a bit? It's cheaper. We'll help where we can." I fought back tears and tried not to sound ungrateful. Over the next few months, I did what I thought I had to do. I took on another job waiting tables at a 24-hour diner. My grades slipped from A's to B's as I shuffled from lectures to shifts to different shifts. By the end of that year, I was exhausted. My scholarship required maintaining a certain GPA. I dropped below it by a fraction of a point. The letter came in April, scholarship revoked. I cried in the library bathroom for an hour, then called my parents again. "We just don't have it, Liv," Dad said. "Your grandpa's farm sale didn't bring in what we thought. My hours got cut. Look, the community college in town has a great transfer program. You can live at home, save money, finish later. We're not saying you'll never go back," Mom added. "Just be realistic. Sometimes life doesn't go perfectly." I moved home that summer, humiliated and drained, and enrolled at Columbus Community College. For a while, I told myself it didn't matter. A degree was a degree, right? But something in me knotted up every time I drove past the highway exit to Ohio State. At community college, I took night classes and a medical assistant program, something practical, something that would get me a job faster. I told everyone I'd changed my mind about what I wanted. They all praised me for being mature. My parents repeated that line to anyone who asked. "Liv realized she didn't want all that debt," Mom would say over pot roast at Sunday dinners. "She's so independent. We're really proud of how she's handling things." Independent. Translation: we don't plan to spend another dime on her. By 22, I was working full-time at a busy clinic, taking the occasional online class when I could afford it. The college fund became a story we didn't talk about. My grandparents' promise turned into one of those life happens anecdotes people trot out to explain why things didn't work out. If you'd asked me then, I would have said I was over it. I wasn't. I just didn't know what I didn't know. All of that changed at my brother's housewarming party. I was 24, still in my Navy scrubs because my shift had run late. Ethan was 22, 1 year out of a business degree from a private college he'd barely scraped through. He'd always been the golden boy, but this time he actually had something to show for it. A picture-perfect 3-bedroom colonial in a new development across town, complete with a white porch and a welcome sign Amanda, his fiancée, had found on Etsy. "Come on, you have to see the kitchen," Amanda said as soon as I walked in, practically vibrating with excitement. "Your mom picked the countertops. They're obsessed." She dragged me through a sea of cousins and neighbors and people I vaguely recognized from old-school events. The house smelled like catered food and new paint. The kitchen was straight out of a home improvement show. White cabinets, stainless steel appliances, and a massive center island with gleaming stone that definitely wasn't from the bargain warehouse. "Olivia, you made it," my mom gushed, pulling me into a flour-dusty hug. "Put your cheesecake in the fridge, sweetheart. We're drowning in dessert." I slid my store-brand cheesecake into the fridge, next to rows of glass cups filled with some kind of mousse. My Aunt Lisa was leaning on the island, sipping wine. "This looks amazing, Carol," she said to my mom. "You and Dan really went all out." My mom's shoulders lifted with quiet pride. "Well, when your child finds their forever home, you do what you have to," she said. "The market's insane. There's no way they could have done it alone, not with these interest rates." "How much was the down payment?" my aunt asked. "Oh, around 80,000, my mom said casually. "We were lucky we still had Olivia's old college fund sitting around. It just made sense to put it to good use, you know?" The room spun. I gripped the refrigerator handle so hard my fingers hurt. "And Olivia's okay with that?" my aunt asked, sounding a little scandalized. My mom chuckled, lowering her voice, but not enough. "She doesn't even know the details," she said. "She dropped out, remember? Always said she didn't want to be chained to college debt. She's doing great on her own." Meanwhile, Ethan needed real help getting established. It's all for the family anyway. I backed away slowly, her words echoing in my head. We still had Olivia's old college fund. She dropped out, she's doing great on her own. I made it to the half bath off the hallway before the tears came. I locked the door, braced my hands on the sink, and stared at myself. My face was pale, freckles standing out against my skin. My hazel eyes looked huge, rimmed with red. A strand of hair had come loose from my ponytail and stuck to my cheek. I looked like a stranger. I also looked like an idiot. All those months of double shifts, of swallowing my pride when I moved back home, of telling myself I was making the best of Ethan the whole time, the money had been there. They had just decided it belonged to Ethan more than it belonged to me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my friend and coworker Jenna. "How's fancy suburbia?" she'd written. I stared at the little blinking cursor for a long time before typing back, "My parents used my college fund to buy my brother a house." Then I slipped my phone away, wiped my face, and forced myself back into the kitchen. For the rest of the party, I played the good daughter. I smiled for photos, accepted hugs, and listened to Ethan give a toast about how none of this would be possible without Mom and Dad. He caught my eye as everyone clapped, and for the first time, I wondered if he knew. On the drive home, my hands shook so badly on the steering wheel that I had to pull into a gas station and sit for 10 minutes until I could breathe again. By the time I made it to my cramped apartment, Jenna had called twice. I dialed her back with numb fingers. "What happened?" she asked the second she picked up. "Are you serious?" I told her everything. The house, the overheard conversation, the $80,000 that had apparently been just sitting around. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Okay," she said finally, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "First of all, that's beyond messed up. Second, have you actually seen any paperwork on this so-called market crash that wiped out your fund?" "No," I admitted. "Dad just said things were tight, that the market was down. Do you still have any old statements, emails, anything from the 529 plan?" I thought about the dusty shoebox under my bed, the one stuffed with college acceptance letters, birthday cards from my grandparents, and an ancient printed statement I'd kept because it made the whole thing feel real. "Maybe," I said. "Find them," Jenna said. "Now. And live? I know this is your family, but you might also need—" I laughed, a bitter, shaky sound. "I can't afford a lawyer. I work at a clinic and I live in a shoebox. Lots of lawyers do free consultations," she said. "At least find out if what they did is even legal." After we hung up, I pulled out the shoebox. Inside was the old statement from my freshman year. It listed the account number, the name of the investment company, the balance at the time. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life back then, $96,000. My hands trembled as I typed the company's name into my browser and dialed the customer service number. "Bright Path Education Savings, this is Daniel, how can I help you today?" I gave him the account number and my information. After a few security questions, he cheerfully told me the account was still active. Active? I thought it was empty. "Well, it looks like the original account is basically at zero," he said, clicking. "But the remaining balance was transferred into a different 529 a couple years back." "Let me see, yes, here it is. Same account owners, different beneficiary. Ethan Harper." I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles went white. "So you're saying my parents moved the money from my college fund to my brother's college fund?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That's what the records show. Completely legal for the account owners to change the beneficiary." "Do you have a record of when that happened?" I asked. "Looks like the transfer was initiated 3 years ago in May," he said. "Right after the spring semester ended. My last semester at Ohio State." I thanked him, asked him to email me a full statement history, and hung up. Then I sat on my bed and stared at the wall as my entire life until that point rearranged itself in my head. They hadn't just let the fund run out. They had moved it. Quietly. Deliberately. Without telling me. To Ethan. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I read every line of the PDF Bright Path sent me. There it was in black and white. Years of contributions from my grandparents, withdrawals for my tuition, then a massive transfer out $78,342.11 to new 529 beneficiary. Ethan Harper. I scrolled down to see the current balance of that new account. It was zero. The money was gone. Probably into Ethan's granite countertops. The next day at work, Jenna took one look at my face and shoved a coffee into my hands. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "I've seen an account statement," I replied. I showed her the PDF on my phone. She read, lips tightening, then scrolled back to the top. "They took money your grandparents clearly meant for you and used it for Ethan," she said slowly. "Did they at least ask you?" "No," I said. "They told me it was gone." She exhaled through her nose. "I have a cousin who's a lawyer. Family and estate stuff. I'm texting him. At least talk to him. You deserve to know your options." I protested. She ignored me. That's how, 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a small legal office downtown across from a woman in a sharp gray blazer named Rachel Moreno. She adjusted her glasses, paged through the printed statements I'd brought, and listened as I told the whole story from the beginning: Grandma's will, the coffee can, Ohio State, the market crash, Ethan's house. "So technically," she said when I was done, "your parents, as owners of the 529, had the legal authority to change the beneficiary and transfer the funds." "That's true." My stomach sank. "But," she continued, holding up a finger, "there's also a concept called donor intent. If your grandparents clearly expressed, in writing, that this money was for your education, and your parents knowingly diverted it elsewhere, there could be an argument that they breached their duty as custodians of that gift." I thought of the note my grandma wrote. "I have a letter from her," I said. "And birthday cards where she wrote for your college fund, Liv. Emails where she told my mom she was so glad I wouldn't have to worry about tuition." Rachel nodded. "All of that helps. Now, suing your parents would be messy. Courts are reluctant to wade into purely family disputes unless there's clear fraud. But the fact that they lied to you about the money being gone? That they induced you to make major life decisions like dropping out based on that lie? That starts to look less like a family decision and more like misrepresentation. Could I win?" I asked, my voice small. "Maybe," she said honestly. "But litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally brutal. What I see more often in cases like this is leverage. A strongly worded letter, the credible threat of a lawsuit, can motivate people to make things right without a judge ever getting involved." "Leverage," I repeated. "Right now, they think you don't know and you won't push back," Rachel said. "If you confront them with documentation and a lawyer's card, that changes the power dynamic. The question is, what do you want? Do you want the exact amount back? An apology? Both? Or do you just want them to understand what they did?" I thought about that for a long moment. I pictured my grandma in her favorite faded cardigan, pressing a crisp $20 bill into my hand on my 16th birthday and saying, "For the college jar. Don't let anyone talk you out of your dreams, Liv." "I want enough to finish school," I said finally, "without drowning in loans. And I want them to admit they chose Ethan over me." Rachel nodded once. "Then here's what I suggest. You gather every piece of evidence you can: letters, emails, texts, anything that shows your grandparents' intent. I'll draft a letter outlining the facts and potential claims. But before I send it, you talk to them face to face, calmly, with the documents. Give them a chance to respond like parents, not defendants." "And if they don't?" I asked. "Then we send the letter," she said. "And we see how much they care about their reputation, their relationship with you, and possibly with the rest of the family once this becomes public record." Her eyes were kind, but there was steel underneath. Walking home from that meeting, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not sadness. Control. For the first time since I'd stood in that dorm stairwell sobbing into my phone, I had a plan. It started with a group text from my mom later that week. "Family dinner this Sunday at 5. Everyone better be there." Red-eye stared at it for a long time, then typed, "I'll be there." Sunday came fast. I almost backed out 3 times. My heart hammered as I drove to my parents' house, the manila folder with statements and printed emails sitting on the passenger seat like a silent witness. My phone was in my pocket, Voice memo app pre-opened just like Jenna had insisted. You're allowed to protect yourself, she'd said. If they start rewriting history, you'll have proof. I told myself I wouldn't need it. I turned it on anyway. Inside, the house looked the same as always. The photo wall of Ethan's football trophies and my honor roll certificates, the faded couch, the smell of roast chicken and garlic. Liv, you made it, Dad said, pulling me into a hug that felt too tight. Haven't seen much of you lately. Busy with work, I said, my voice flat. Ethan and Amanda were already at the table laughing about something. They greeted me like nothing was wrong, and for a moment I almost wondered if I really was overreacting. Then I looked at my parents, at the comfortable, unbothered way they moved around the kitchen, and the feeling evaporated. We sat down. My dad said grace. Plates were passed, wine poured. Halfway through the meal, between bites of roasted potatoes, I cleared my throat. We need to talk about the college fund, I said. The clink of silverware on plates seemed suddenly very loud. My mom blinked. What about it, honey? I know you used it for Ethan's house, I said. I heard you tell Aunt Lisa. I've seen the Bright Path statements. I know you moved the money into a 529 in his name 3 years ago. My dad's fork paused midway to his mouth. Ethan's eyes widened. My mom's face went pale, then flushed. I don't know what you think you heard, she began. I heard you say you used Olivia's old college fund for the down payment, I cut in. After telling me the market wiped it out. After I dropped out and moved back home because you said there wasn't enough to keep going. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. Dad set his fork down with a sharp clack. We are not doing this at the dinner table, he said. Yes, I said quietly. We are. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, sliding a few pages onto the table between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat. Bright Path statement history. Grandma's handwritten note. A printout of the will clause. Liv, sweetheart, you're misunderstanding, Mom said, her smile brittle. The market did crash. We lost a lot. We just reallocated what was left. Reallocated. From me to Ethan. Ethan looked between us, his face crumpling. Wait. What? Mom, Dad, what is she talking about? Dad rubbed his temples. It's complicated. No, I said. It's actually very simple. Grandma and Grandpa left that money for my education. It says so right here. You were supposed to manage it for that purpose. Instead, after paying a couple years of tuition, you moved almost $80,000 to an account for Ethan and then told me it was gone. You dropped out, my dad snapped. You decided you didn't want to kill yourself with loans. We supported that. I dropped out because you said there was no money, I said. Those are not the same thing. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We thought you'd be okay, Liv. You're always okay. You got that job at the clinic? You moved out, you didn't need the money the way Ethan did. He was struggling. We didn't want him buried in rent and debt before he even started his life. So you buried me instead, I said softly. Silence fell over the table. Ethan pushed his plate away. Is my house paid for with Liv's college fund? He asked, his voice shaking. Yes or no? Mom covered her mouth with her napkin. Dad looked at his hands. Yes, he said finally. But it's not that simple. It is that simple, Ethan shot back. He turned to me. I didn't know. I swear to God, Liv, I had no idea. They told me they'd saved for both of us and my part just hadn't been used. I believe you, I said. My parents looked between us like they'd lost control of a car they'd been driving for years. Look, Dad said, forcing his voice calmer. Legally, that account was in our name. We were the owners. We had every right to change the beneficiary. It's not like we took the money and went to Vegas. No, I agreed. You just took the one thing Grandma and Grandpa made me promise I'd do, finish college, and gave it to Ethan instead. My mom sniffled. We helped you too. We paid for your first years, didn't we? We let you live here rent-free. We supported you through that medical assistant program. I never said you did nothing, I said. I'm saying you lied. You looked me in the eye, told me the fund was gone, and watched me give up on my degree so Ethan could have a mortgage. It was our money to manage, Dad insisted, raising his voice now. Your grandparents trusted us. Families help the child who needs it most. Funny, I said, my own volume creeping up, because from where I'm sitting, I was the one working 2 jobs and losing my scholarship while Ethan was crashing your car and taking gap semesters to party. Ethan winced, but he didn't argue. Mom burst into full-blown tears. How can you be so cruel? We did our best. We're not perfect, Olivia. We just wanted both of you to have a shot. You gave him my shot, I said. I took a deep breath and pulled out one more item from the folder, Rachel's business card. I talked to a lawyer, I said. She thinks a court might be interested in the fact that you misrepresented the status of a fund clearly intended for me, then used it for someone else. Dad's face went from red to almost purple. You what? He hissed. I didn't file anything, I said quickly. I don't want to sue you. I don't want a public mess. But I'm not going to just swallow this. Not anymore. Mom's voice was small. What do you want then? I met her eyes. I want enough to finish a degree, I said. Not tomorrow, not all at once. I know you don't have 80 grand lying around, but I want you to acknowledge what you did. And I want a plan to fix it. A repayment schedule. Something in writing. Otherwise, Rachel sends this card to someone named opposing counsel and we let a judge sort it out. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan stood up so fast his chair scraped. I'll sell the house, he blurted. If that's what it takes, we can downsize. Amanda and I can rent a while. I'm not going to live in something that was supposed to be yours. Amanda, to her credit, nodded, eyes shining. If we have to, she said, we will. My parents gaped at them. No one is selling anything, Dad snapped. This is ridiculous. We're not tearing our family apart over some fund that was always under our control. Some fund, I repeated. I slid the card back into the folder and stood. I'm not asking you to decide tonight, I said. You can talk to your own lawyer. Or your conscience, or both. But I'm done pretending nothing happened. Call me when you're ready to talk about making it right. Mom reached for me. Liv, please don't. I stepped back. For the first time, I said quietly, I'm doing what's right for me. I left my barely eaten dinner on the table and walked out. In the car, I turned off the voice memo app with shaking hands. I didn't cry until I got home. They didn't call. Not right away, anyway. For 2 weeks, the only sound from my parents' direction was silence. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed at the clinic. Unknown number. This is Olivia, I answered. Ms. Harper, this is John West, legal counsel for your parents, Daniel and Carol Harper, a smooth male voice said. They've received your concerns regarding the 529 plan and have asked me to reach out. My stomach flipped. Okay, I understand you're represented as well? He asked. Yes, I said. Rachel Moreno. Excellent, he said. I'll contact Ms. Moreno so we can discuss potential resolutions. Your parents are very eager to handle this privately within the family. Of course they were. Within an hour, Rachel emailed me, got a call from their guy. This is good. It means they're taking you seriously. Negotiations were slow and frustrating. At first, their lawyer framed it as a miscommunication, insisting that my parents had always intended to support both children as best they could with limited resources. Rachel countered with Grandma's note, the wording in the will, and the specific timing of the transfer. We went back and forth like that for weeks. At one point, my dad texted me a long message about how much stress this was causing them, how ungrateful I was being after everything they'd done. I didn't reply. Rachel told me to keep all communications but not engage directly, and I listened. Eventually, their lawyer floated a proposal, a lump sum payment of $20,000, framed as a generous gift to help further your education. Rachel advised me not to accept. That doesn't come close to the value of what was taken, she said. It also doesn't acknowledge any wrongdoing. It just turns this into charity, which it absolutely isn't. We held firm. The turning point came when my Aunt Linda found out. I didn't tell her. Mom did, in a tearful call where she cast herself as the victim of her unreasonable daughter. But Aunt Linda has always been sharper than people give her credit for. She called me the next day. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Did they really use your college money for Ethan's house?" "Yes," I said. "I have the statements." "I knew something was off when they bought that place," she muttered. "Your mother swore it was from refinancing and savings. Your grandparents would be furious. You know that, right?" "I know," I whispered. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm on your side," she said. "And if this ends up in court, I'll testify about every time they bragged about Liv's college fund and how it was all for you." A week later, my parents' lawyer came back with a very different tone. They were now prepared to acknowledge that the funds in question were originally intended for your benefit and offer a structured repayment plan totaling $65,000 over 10 years, secured by a lien on their house. It still wasn't the full amount, but it was closer. And the formal letter they were willing to sign included language about regrettable decisions and failure to communicate truthfully. Rachel advised I take it. "In court, there's no guarantee you'd get a judgment for the exact transferred amount," she said. "And even if you did, collecting could be a nightmare. This way, you have a binding agreement and security interest in their property. It's not perfect justice, but it's real, usable money." So I agreed. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, I sat in Rachel's office and signed a settlement that said, in careful legalese, that my parents had mishandled a fund meant for me and were now obligated to repay a substantial portion of it. Later that evening, my dad sent me a text. "We signed. Hope you're happy. Your mother hasn't stopped crying all day." I stared at his words for a long time. Then I typed back, "I hope one day you're more upset about what you did than about being caught." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The money came in chunks. The first payment hit my account like a small earthquake, $12,000 wired directly from the equity line they'd taken out on their house. I used it to do 3 things. First, I paid off the remaining loans from my medical assistant program. Second, I put down a deposit on a slightly bigger apartment, closer to the university. And third, I re-enrolled at Ohio State. Not full-time, I couldn't afford to quit my job. But 2 classes a semester, then 3, in a major that made more sense for who I'd become: Health Services Administration. Balancing 12-hour clinic shifts with night classes was brutal. I ate a lot of cheap meals, fell asleep on my textbooks more times than I can count, and said no to more social invitations than I wanted to. But every time I felt tempted to quit, I thought about that housewarming party. About my mom's voice, light and proud, as she talked about using Olivia's old college fund for someone else's dream. That memory kept me awake. Ethan called a few times during those early semesters. "I still feel like garbage about the house," he admitted once. "It's not your fault," I said. "You didn't know." "Yeah, but I benefited," he said. "Amanda and I talked about downsizing again, but they begged us not to. Said they'd already taken out the line of credit, that selling now would be pointless." "That's between you and them," I said. "I have my own path now." Our relationship stayed complicated. He sent me Starbucks gift cards during finals and Venmo'd me $50 for textbooks when he got a bonus at work. He came to one of my presentations and sat proudly in the back row. My parents, on the other hand, stayed mostly distant. They still had Sunday dinners, but I stopped going. Once in a while, my mom left voicemails about missing you and wishing things could go back to normal. But normal, I'd realized, had never really been fair. Sometimes at night, guilt gnawed at me. They were my parents. They'd raised me, fed me, paid for soccer cleats and piano lessons and school trips. Wasn't I being too harsh? Too unforgiving? Then I'd remember how easily they'd rationalize taking what was meant for me. How they'd called me ungrateful for wanting the chance to finish what I started. The guilt never lasted long. 3 years after that first settlement payment, I walked across a stage in a navy gown and shook hands with the dean of the College of Public Health. Olivia Harper, Bachelor of Science in Health Services Management, magna cum laude, the announcer said. The applause echoed in the arena. In the stands, Jenna screamed loud enough for everyone to hear. Ethan whistled. Amanda waved a homemade sign that said, "Finally officially graduated." Next to them were 2 empty seats with reserved slips on them. My parents' names were printed in neat black letters. They'd texted that morning to say they just couldn't face everyone after everything. For the first time, their absence didn't feel like a knife. It felt like confirmation that I'd made the right choice. After the ceremony, as we took photos outside, Ethan hugged me so hard my cap nearly fell off. "You did it," he said. "Without them." "Not completely without them," I said wryly. "They're still sending those payments." He grimaced. "Yeah, they complain about it a lot, I'm sure," I said. "But honestly, that's between them and their conscience now. I've got what I needed." A month later, I moved to Chicago for an entry-level management job at a big hospital network. The rest of the settlement money covered the move and a few months of rent while I adjusted. My new apartment was small and drafty and 1,000 miles from the streets I grew up on. It was also entirely mine. Sometimes, late at night, when the city hums outside my window and my eyes blur from spreadsheets and policy memos, I think about karma. People love to talk about it like it's some mystical force that automatically balances the scales. But what I've learned is that sometimes, karma needs help. Sometimes, karma looks like a 20-something woman sitting in a lawyer's office, daring to say, "What you did was wrong, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise." Do I have a picture-perfect relationship with my parents now? We talk on holidays. They send me polite texts about the weather in Ohio and ask vaguely about work. My mom comments on my Facebook photos with things like, "So proud of you, honey," and a heart emoji. They never mention the settlement. Neither do I. But every month, when that payment shows up in my account, I remember the girl who thought her dreams were over at 19. I wish I could tell her, "It's going to hurt. You're going to see the worst in people you love, but you're also going to find out how strong you are. One day, you'll sit in your own apartment in a city you chose, doing work you care about, and you'll know you got there because you stopped letting other people decide what you deserved." My parents used my college fund to buy my brother a house. They gave him walls and a roof and a yard. In the end, my revenge wasn't taking that away. It was building something of my own on the foundation they tried to steal. Not granite countertops. Not a suburban dream. Just a life that finally belongs to me.